When the kidnappers forced Preston to choose between the two of us, he abandoned his childhood sweetheart and chose me. But I didn't go with him. Because I knew he would regret it. That was exactly how it had happened in my previous life. After I was rescued, Preston's childhood sweetheart was photographed in an indecent state by the kidnappers. That very night, she returned home and slit her wrists. Preston pretended not to care at all. He went through with the wedding as scheduled, marrying me on time, yet after the marriage, he made my life a living hell. 7 years later, I finally forced him to agree to a divorce. But on the way to the courthouse, he lost control of the car and drove it straight off a cliff. Even at the moment of death, he was still blaming me. We owed Freya in the first place. We should have spent this lifetime atoning for her. And you, what right did you have to live in peace? So this time, starting over, I refused to live like that again. Aaron, come with me. The moment I realized I had been reborn, the kidnappers were already pressing knives against the throats of Freya and me. They demanded that Preston choose, only one of us could be taken away. Preston's gaze wavered between the two of us. After a fierce internal struggle, he made the same choice he had made in my previous life. He reached out his hand toward me. But I shook my head firmly. Preston, save Freya first. In this life, I didn't want to owe anyone. And I certainly didn't want to live burdened by another person's death. Preston seemed to let out a breath of relief when he heard that. Aaron, you're my fiancé. I should have saved you first. He paused, then added coolly, but since you insist, don't blame me for it. Then he took Freya and left the scene as fast as he could, as if afraid I might change my mind the very next second. But I wasn't like him. I didn't regret my choices after making them. In my previous life, it had gone like this: he arrived with the ransom money, only for the kidnappers to raise the price at the last minute, insisting that only one person could be taken away first. Left with no choice, Preston chose me. But while we were scrambling to gather more money, the kidnappers, driven by lust, photographed Freya in a humiliating state, and then tried to assault her. Fortunately, we arrived in time with the police. Yet even though the worst didn't happen, for a young girl, that scene had already stripped away all dignity. Freya returned home in a daze. That night, after everyone had fallen asleep, she slit her wrists. By the time she was discovered, it was already too late. When Preston received the news, he showed no visible emotion. He calmly handled Freya's funeral arrangements and paid a large sum to placate her family. Even when I offered to postpone the wedding, he rejected it outright. Marrying you was planned long ago, Aaron. We can't let outsiders interfere, can we? And yet, that very outsider was the one he mourned for a full 7 years. He married me only to trap me, to make me atone for Freya. But what had I done wrong? After Preston left with them, I began thinking of ways to save myself. Because this time, I wasn't sure he would come back. In my previous life, when he pretended to hug Freya goodbye, he had slipped a tracking device into her pocket. That was how, even after the kidnappers changed locations, we were able to find her immediately. But just now, it was as if he had completely forgotten about it. I guessed that from beginning to end, the only person he truly wanted to save was Freya. Choosing me back then had merely been an act, done out of obligation, out of fear of public scrutiny because of my status as his fiancée. After all, ours was nothing more than a family alliance. Whatever affection existed between us had always been shallow. Freya, on the other hand, had walked beside him through his most innocent years. They were childhood sweethearts. And also close confidants. It was only natural that Preston regretted his choice in the previous life. This time, he finally got what he wanted. I was happy for him. And at the same time, I didn't forget to look for a chance to escape. I knew that when the kidnappers relocated, they would pass by an auto repair shop. The mechanics there were notorious, brutal fighters, fierce and relentless. In my previous life, when the kidnappers had tried to temporarily occupy the shop, they hadn't expected the owner to be such a tough character. He refused outright. Tools were grabbed. A vicious brawl broke out. The kidnappers probably never imagined there were people even more savage than themselves. Afraid of drawing too much attention, they fled in disgrace. Later, when the kidnappers were caught, the shop owner even came forward to testify. This time, just like before, they left one person in the car to watch me while the rest rushed toward the repair shop. My hands were bound behind my back. The kidnapper in the driver's seat didn't take me seriously at all. I seized the moment, biting the interior door handle open with my teeth, pushing the door wide, and sprinting forward like my life depended on it. The kidnappers and I had the same destination, the auto repair shop. I was gambling that they wouldn't let me die. So I ran straight in, fully exposed. By then, the repair shop was already in chaos. At a glance, I spotted the young owner. His features were sharp and well-defined, radiating a sense of righteous resolve. Paired with his clean, efficient movements, there was something indescribably cool about him. Afraid of getting caught in the crossfire, I ducked low and rushed toward him with all my strength. I misjudged the distance. The next thing I knew, I crashed straight into him and knocked him to the ground. Falling into his arms, my face went pale. I'm sorry. I stammered frantically. Could you please help me? Please save me. He glanced at me, his brows knitting together. In the next second, he wrapped an arm around me and rolled across the ground several times. Bang! A stool slammed down exactly where we had just been lying. Had he reacted even a second later, I would have been dead. Still shaken, I saw the kidnappers realize I had escaped. What began as a fight over territory instantly turned into a standoff over me. The two sides faced off. I looked up at the man beside me, eyes wide, and whispered, "As long as you save me, I'll do anything." He didn't answer. Instead, he stared at the kidnappers, deep in thought. Someone behind him couldn't help but mutter, "Kenneth, better not make trouble where there doesn't need to be any." So, his name was Kenneth. When no answer came, my heart slowly sank. Forget it. Why force someone into a decision they didn't want to make? When the leader of the kidnappers called for me the third time, I took a step forward. But before I could move far, a hand pressed down on my shoulder. I was forced to stop. Kenneth stepped forward. Facing the kidnappers, he said calmly, "She's under my protection today." As if even fate had decided to help me, the roar of motorcycle engines suddenly thundered outside the shop. A confident smile spread across Kenneth's face. "My backup's here." The kidnappers shot me a resentful glare, cursed under their breath, and finally backed off. Only then did the tight knot in my chest loosen. I let out a quiet breath, and felt the rope around my wrist slacken. Kenneth had already cut it loose. "My name is Aaron." "Thank you, truly." I reached out my hand to him. But Kenneth's gaze lingered on my wrist instead. The rope burns were deep and angry, streaked with blood, painfully conspicuous. "Let me take care of that for you." I shook my head. "It's nothing. Just a small injury." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "And who was it that said, if I saved you, you'd do anything?" Before I could protest, he pressed me down onto a stool and grabbed a first aid kit. "Hold still. This might hurt." I bit my lip. Watching him focus so intently on treating my wound, a warmth quietly bloomed in my chest. I remembered the early days after marrying Preston in my previous life. One time, he had come home drunk. I helped him back to the bedroom and casually reminded him to drink less. That single sentence made him explode. He shoved me away viciously. I lost my balance and fell to the floor. The jade bracelet on my wrist smashed against the ground, shattering into pieces. Shards cut into my skin. I screamed, clutching my bleeding wrist, crying out in pain. Preston looked at me. And only stared coldly. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Good. That's exactly how it should feel. Think about how much more she suffered, thousands of times more than this. And now she can't even scream anymore. If it weren't for saving you, would she have been humiliated by the kidnappers? Would she have lost the will to live?" I sat there on the floor, stunned, disbelief written all over my face as my heart turned cold, inch by inch. After a long time, I finally found my voice. "But the kidnappers took both Freya and me to threaten you. And it was your choice to save me first. So why are you saying this now?" The drunken haze on Preston's face had mostly faded, but his eyes were still icy. "Aaron, I never supported this marriage alliance in the first place. If you hadn't told Grandma that you liked me, she wouldn't have forced me to marry you." I laughed suddenly. "So what you're saying is, if I didn't exist, you'd only need to save Freya, right?" Haha. The sound felt hollow even to my own ears. "Preston, there's something seriously wrong with you. Instead of blaming the kidnappers, you turn around and blame me." I stood up, returned to my room, and treated my wounds on my own. From that day on, no matter how much pain I was in, I never told Preston again. And now, the man in front of me was afraid I might hurt. Kenneth was clumsily blowing on my wound, trying to ease the sting. My eyes burned. I closed them briefly, took a deep breath, and asked, despite already knowing the answer, "What are you doing?" Kenneth looked up at me, his smile unguarded and pure. "When I got hurt as a kid, my mom used to do this. Does it feel any better?" I nodded. "Yeah, much better." With my approval, he continued. Until the moment was abruptly interrupted. "Bro Kenneth. I heard someone was causing trouble at your shop, so I rushed over." "Damn, where'd you find such a pretty girl?" A tall man with tattooed arms strode in through the door. The moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. "That's rare. I think this is the first time I've seen such a beautiful girl here." As he spoke, an oddly shy grin crept onto his face. Kenneth immediately stepped in front of me. "Thanks, but the problem's already been handled. The rest is none of your business. I'll buy you a drink another day." The tattooed man froze for a second, then laughed. So bro Kenneth's got a girl now, huh? Can't even be bothered with his brothers anymore. He turned his head away with an exaggerated huff, clearly sulking. Kenneth rubbed his forehead and pulled him aside, lowering his voice. Can you read the room? Go somewhere else. Anywhere. Bro Kenneth, is she your girlfriend? Doesn't she look like it? She does. You two look perfect together. Good. At least you've got eyes. Then you owe me wedding candy. You'll get it. The two of them whispered back and forth not far away. Though they tried to keep their voices down, every word drifted clearly into my ears. To ease the awkwardness, I pretended to keep myself busy. Looking left, right, up, down, anywhere but at them. A few minutes later, Kenneth finally managed to send the tattooed man away. Once he was gone, Kenneth turned to me and asked, "Where do you live? I'll take you home." Maybe it was selfishness. But suddenly, I didn't want to go back so soon. My parents were always busy with their own lives. Even if I stayed away for a month, they wouldn't ask. As for Preston, if I wasn't mistaken, he had probably been reborn too. This time, he was likely eager to spend the rest of his life with Freya. In my previous life, during the 7 years I was married to him, he never took me to any social events. He never shared a bed with me. Whenever others asked about me, his expression was always cold. In the end, I became nothing but a joke in their circles. In this life, I decided to stay far away from him. So I looked at Kenneth and asked softly, "Could you let me stay with you for a few days?" My fingers cautiously tugged at the hem of his jacket, giving it a small shake. Considering both lifetimes, he seemed like a good person. And someone capable of protecting me. If I leaned on him, would he refuse? Kenneth suddenly leaned closer. His gaze burned intensely. "Little girl, if you keep doing that, I might take you seriously." We were so close I could even smell the clean, faint scent of soap on him. I swallowed instinctively and was about to speak, when a familiar voice rang out behind us. "What are you two doing?" It was Preston. He had arrived. With the police. "Are you okay?" Preston looked at me. The concern in his eyes didn't seem fake. I spread my hands slightly. "Do I look like I'm not?" Preston fell silent. Freya walked in right after him. She glanced around the repair shop, which had already returned to normal operation, and asked bluntly, "Aaron, how exactly did you escape from the kidnappers?" "As far as I know, there were 6 of them. Your hands were tied, and you weren't familiar with the area at all." "I'm genuinely curious." What was Freya implying? Everyone knew that the Lee family and the Wood family were planning an alliance. And that both sides were eyeing the land in the southern part of the city. The auction was scheduled for 10 days later. Highest bid wins. Yet something like this happened at such a critical moment, and the ransom demanded was absurdly high. "I can't help but think otherwise, Aaron," she added coolly. She was implying that the kidnappers had been hired by me. I had to admit. In 2 lifetimes, I had never felt this speechless. What happened to Freya in my previous life had filled me with helplessness and sympathy. But in this life, I was essentially the one who saved her. And the first thing she did after being rescued was turn around and bite me. It was chilling. I suddenly raised my hand and shouted, "Officer! Someone here is slandering me." And just like that, all of us were taken away. While waiting for questioning, Freya still refused to let it go. "Aaron, why don't you dare say it?" I snorted coldly. "Why should I explain anything to you? You're not the police." Freya was left momentarily speechless. Preston finally couldn't stand it anymore and immediately stepped in to speak for her. "Aaron, Freya just wants to understand the truth," he said. "So she knows what she should or shouldn't say during the interrogation." Then he turned to me sharply. "What, are you planning to lie in front of the officers?" Anger surged across Preston's face. He stood up and pointed at me. "Aaron, you're being completely unreasonable." At that moment, Kenneth walked out of the interrogation room and saw the scene. Without a word, he stepped in front of me. "Put your hand down." His tone was flat, devoid of emotion. Yet it carried an undeniable pressure that made it impossible to resist. I hid behind Kenneth. I couldn't see either of their expressions, but I could almost smell gunpowder in the air. Then I heard Preston ask coldly, "What are you to her?" Kenneth turned his head slightly to look at me. The corner of his lips lifted. "What do you think?" he asked calmly. I looked up at his impossibly perfect profile, so close it stole my breath. On impulse, I brought my thumb and index finger together, forming a small heart. Preston saw it. His face darkened instantly. Just then, an officer called him away to give a statement. After a round of questioning, things finally began to take shape. The police had locked onto potential suspects. For now, the priority was capturing the kidnappers before proceeding further. But I knew the truth. This was the work of Preston's business rival. After leaving the station, Kenneth looked at me and said simply, "All right." "What?" I stared at him, confused. He explained, "The thing you asked me about this afternoon. It's a yes." I finally understood. He was referring to my request to stay with him. "It's just me and my mom at home. She's gone back to the old house for now. I usually live at the repair shop anyway. You can stay however you like." I was just about to agree, when Preston spoke up from the side. "Aaron, your parents already know about the kidnapping. They've probably just landed and are on their way home now. Are you sure you're not going back?" A sharp ache spread through my chest. Even my own parents' movements. Preston, an outsider, knew them better than I did. As far back as I could remember, they had always been busy. Too busy to remember my birthday. Too busy to attend a single parent-teacher meeting. I had even deliberately failed exams. Deliberately hurt myself. Because only then would they appear. Briefly. To grant me a scrap of attention, a drop of love. Later, I stopped hoping. I learned to celebrate my own birthdays. I paid the flower shop lady, gentle and pretty, to attend school meetings for me. And so I grew up alone. Until I met Preston. It was on the school basketball court. He casually blocked a ball that had been about to hit me. Under the sunlight, the boy's features were strikingly handsome. A few beads of sweat slid down his forehead, glimmering like crystal. The corner of his eyes lifted slightly, carrying a faint, barely noticeable arrogance. "Watch out," he said. Paired with his cool, detached voice, that single glance was enough to make me fall. I was timid back then. I whispered a quick thank you and ran off. After that, I started paying attention to him, deliberately and unintentionally. I knew he had a very close childhood sweetheart. But their relationship seemed to stop at just that. Childhood friends. Young love is quiet, unspoken, yet it spreads silently in the heart. Later on, even an accidental encounter or a fleeting exchange of glances was enough to make my face burn and my heart race. I always knew. I probably wouldn't have much say in my future marriage. So when I found out that my alliance partner was Preston, I was happy for a long time. My parents approved of him as well. They contacted him more often than they contacted me. In my previous life, when I asked for a divorce, they rejected me outright. "Preston is capable and tolerant of your flaws," they said. "Why don't you cherish him properly instead of making us worry?" I knew that after our marriage, the interests of the Lee family and the Wood family had become tightly bound together. Divorce was never going to be easy. So I endured. Year after year. Until I developed depression. Until I began harming myself. Only then did Preston finally agree to the divorce. Now that I had been given another chance, I wanted to live for myself. That was why I didn't want to go home. But then I suddenly remembered. There was still something I needed to take care of. I had to go back. Before leaving, I pulled Kenneth's phone out of his pocket, entered my number, and dialed it. Only after hearing it ring did I return the phone to him. "Save my number. Come find me in a couple of days." After that, I hailed a taxi and left. From start to finish, I didn't give Preston a single glance. When I got home, I found my parents sitting in the living room, waiting. Before I could say anything, they launched into a barrage of accusations. "Preston already told us everything that happened today. Can you stop being so willful? Those were kidnappers, your life could have been in danger. And you actually let Preston save someone else first?" My mother sighed heavily. "How can we possibly trust you with the company if you're like this?" Not trusting me. That was why, in my previous life, they handed the company over to Preston. And then they washed their hands of it all, free to chase the dreams they'd abandoned in their youth. My father, who had been sitting silently on the sofa the entire time, suddenly spoke. "You should go ahead and get the wedding over with as soon as possible." "I don't agree." I replied in a tone that left no room for negotiation. "I came back today to tell you this. Tomorrow, I'll go to the Wood family and cancel the engagement. Whether you agree or not doesn't matter. This time, I'm making my own decision. And don't try to threaten me with the company. Give it to whoever you want, or don't give it to me at all. I don't care. I don't want it anymore." Having lived once already, I knew the development trends of the next 7 years. I wasn't about to end up destitute. After saying all that, I returned to my room. They were probably even more disappointed in me now. So what? The next morning, I got up early. Only to find my mother waiting at the table, breakfast already prepared by her own hands. "I heard from Aunt Fong that you got up last night looking for something to eat," she said gently. "That's my fault. I forgot to ask whether you'd had dinner." I froze where I stood, unable to understand how my mother had suddenly become so gentle, so considerate. She reached out affectionately, tucking the loose strands of hair by my cheek behind my ear. Then she said with a hint of guilt, "Your father and I reflected on things last night. Maybe we've been using the wrong approach all along. We wanted you to grow up independent and capable, so we were afraid to spoil you, afraid you'd become willful. If you want to make your own decisions, that's fine. We don't actually have to force you to marry into the Wood family." So, they were agreeing to let me break off the engagement. A sudden wave of bitterness rose in my chest. When Erin was young, she cried and protested too, but all she ever received was scolding. Later, she learned to be obedient and well-behaved, believing that would earn her their attention. And what did she get in return? Only their disappointment, their judgment that she was weak and incompetent. Now, all I had done was use their own methods, say a few harsh words, and suddenly their attitude changed. Even when the car arrived at the Wood family's villa, I still felt as though it weren't real. In truth, the alliance between the Wood family and the Lee family had originally been proposed by Preston's grandmother. It all started at a banquet, where I had helped Mrs. Wood after she fainted from low blood sugar. When she regained consciousness, she was deeply grateful and insisted on taking me as her god-granddaughter. From then on, we grew close. I would occasionally visit the Wood family's old residence for meals. Until one day, I met Preston there. Only then did I realize that the elderly lady I'd saved was Preston's grandmother. She was sharp as a hawk. With a single glance, she saw through my feelings for Preston. That was how everything that followed came to be. Now, having to personally ask her to cancel the engagement, I truly felt sorry. After all, she had already given me the jade bracelet passed down through generations of the Wood family. It seemed there was no choice but to return it. Preston arrived earlier than I did, with Freya beside him. They were both dressed formally. Perfect timing. After I canceled the engagement, they could get engaged themselves right away. Everyone wins. But when I placed the bracelet on the table, Preston suddenly grabbed my wrist. What does this mean? To be fair, I had only told him to meet me at the Wood family's old residence last night. I hadn't mentioned the cancellation. Mrs. Wood looked at the two of us, as if realizing something. Erin, did Preston do something to hurt you? As she spoke, she shot Freya a sharp glare. I bowed respectfully to Mrs. Wood and said calmly, Grandma, I want to break off the engagement with Preston. My tone was as steady as if I were commenting on the weather. Preston's pupils shrank abruptly. He clearly couldn't believe it. Why? Because yesterday, you left me behind to save someone else. I looked at Freya. I think that's the person you actually want to marry, isn't it? Freya was staring at me too, her expression stubborn and fragile, like an unyielding white lotus. No. Doubt flashed across Preston's eyes. Didn't you tell me to save Freya first? That was me testing you. I replied evenly. And the result was obvious. Preston fell silent. Mrs. Wood let out a sigh. I heard everything about yesterday, she said. You're a good child, Erin. Preston doesn't deserve you. Grandma. Preston cut her off abruptly. He tightened his grip on my wrist, as if trying to crush my bones. Erin, I won't agree to this. Don't even think about it. The injury from yesterday hadn't healed yet. With him squeezing like that, it was probably bleeding again. I endured the pain, and suddenly felt like laughing. After Freya died in my previous life, he mourned her for 7 whole years. After being reborn, he couldn't wait to choose her again. I had thought he loved her so deeply that he'd want to marry her immediately. I tugged the corner of my lips into a smile. If that's how you want to be, then tomorrow I'll go to the media and announce the cancellation myself. When that happens, it'll still be the Wood family losing face. With that, I pried his fingers off mine one by one and turned to leave. I didn't expect Preston to chase after me. At the same time, Kenneth's motorcycle pulled up at the gate of the Wood residence. Not wanting to get entangled with Preston any further, I said simply, Sorry, my boyfriend's here to pick me up. Preston frowned, displeasure evident on his face. He sneered, Erin, are you really choosing a poor guy like this as your boyfriend? Can he give you happiness? And instead, should I choose someone like you, hypocritical and two-faced? I walked straight toward Kenneth. But in the next second, my wrist was grabbed again. I cried out in pain. Only then did Preston, who'd caused it, notice the injury on my wrist. Panic flashed across his face. I didn't know you were hurt. I lowered my gaze, a mocking smile curling at my lips. You say that as if you'd care even if you did know. When Kenneth saw what happened, he finally couldn't hold back anymore. He charged forward and threw a punch, knocking Preston straight to the ground, fast, precise, and ruthless. Preston spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes burned with vicious resentment, yet he didn't dare make another reckless move. Kenneth looked down at him and said in a warning tone, Stay away from her. Then he placed his helmet over my head, twisted the throttle, and took me away. The motorcycle sped through the mountain roads. The scenery rushed past my eyes in a blur. I leaned against Kenneth's back, feeling the thrill of speed, as if it could temporarily erase everything unpleasant that had happened. So where does my girlfriend plan to go? Kenneth's voice came from the front. I laughed softly. It seemed he'd heard everything I said earlier. Naturally, I wrapped my arms around his waist and replied, Since you're already calling me your girlfriend, can I go to your place? I'm hungry, by the way. Of course. His laughter echoed through the mountains. And since I'm cooking, I'll need to make 4 dishes. That's a must. For some reason, influenced by him, my heart felt inexplicably light. Kenneth's place was bigger than I'd imagined. He fumbled around and brought me a brand new pair of men's slippers. They were a bit large, but apparently the only unused pair in the house. I slipped them on casually and smiled. It's fine. They'll do. I tidy up from time to time. It shouldn't be too messy, he said. Even though he was clearly the homeowner, yet somehow more nervous than I was. I plopped down onto the sofa, propped my chin on my hand, and looked at him. I don't know how to cook. I'll have to trouble you today. Instead of heading to the kitchen, Kenneth picked up a medical kit and came over. The wound on my wrist, which had been bandaged yesterday, had been squeezed by Preston earlier. Blood had seeped through and dried, sticking the gauze to the skin. Kenneth carefully poured antiseptic onto the gauze, trying to loosen it from the wound. It was delicate work, yet he did it with the utmost seriousness. Half an hour later, he finally finished rebandaging it and reminded me, don't get it wet for the next couple of days. I asked instinctively, then how am I supposed to shower? 2 days without showering won't kill you. After a moment's thought, he added, I won't mind. You dare. I wouldn't. Humph. All right, I'll go cook now. Okay. I smiled and nodded, suddenly realizing that whenever I was with Kenneth, I always felt unusually relaxed. An hour later, he brought out 4 dishes, sweet and sour pork, garlic shrimp, steamed fish, and cucumber salad. He handed me the chopsticks. Try them. After tasting a few bites, I gave him a thumbs up. They looked good, smelled good, and tasted even better, memorable at first bite. Just like him. Looks like I won't have to worry about finding food in the future. That afternoon, I received a call from my father. The gist of it was simple, he wanted me to attend the auction 10 days later. If I could secure the land in the southern part of the city, the company would be handed over to me entirely. I knew that piece of land well. Besides the Wood family and the Lee family, several other companies were eyeing it. In my previous life, the kidnapping had left me deeply shaken. Combined with Freya's death afterward, it was impossible for me not to be affected. I fell seriously ill and missed the auction. But even if I hadn't been sick, I wouldn't have competed against Preston. Back then, my heart was full of him. I believed I'd finally found someone I could entrust my entire life to. At the time, Wood Group was facing a debt crisis. It wasn't easy for Preston to win the bid. In the end, I transferred a large sum from Lee Group to help him. Preston won the auction. He later built a theme park on that land, attracted merchants, and within a few years successfully elevated Wood Group to a new level. That alone proved one thing. That land was a guaranteed profit. Otherwise, so many people wouldn't have been eyeing it. And this time, I was determined to get it. What I didn't expect was Freya coming to beg me. Unlike her aggressive attitude from a few days ago, she now lowered herself completely, pleading in a humble tone. Can you not break off the engagement with Preston? There has never been anything between us beyond friendship. As long as you agree, I'll never appear in front of you again. I looked at her in silence, feeling nothing but speechless. Yes, in my previous life, I believed that too. That they were just close friends. But after Freya died, Preston's behavior went far beyond mourning a friend. I remembered the day he finally agreed to divorce me. It was after my 10th act of self-harm following my depression diagnosis. When he returned home, he found me lying on the floor, covered in blood. Perhaps afraid I would die in his house, he finally agreed. Yet on the way to the divorce office, he suddenly asked, "Do you know today is Freya's death anniversary?" I looked at him blankly and shook my head. I could barely manage my own life. How could I remember such things? My reaction completely enraged him. He pounded the steering wheel furiously and cursed me as cold-blooded and heartless. The life you're living now was bought with Freya's death. Yet you've never shown a shred of gratitude. You even forgot her death anniversary, only thinking about leaving. Do you think this will free you from your conscience? Aaron, you disgust me. I snapped back without restraint. Fine, you're so grateful, you can't forget her. Then why don't you go die with her? The moment the words left my mouth, the car swerved violently and plunged straight off the cliff. Even in his final moments, Preston was still blaming me. We owed Freya in the first place. This lifetime should have been spent atoning for her. And you, what right do you have to live in comfort? But in this lifetime, we owed each other nothing anymore. I wanted to see what kind of ending Preston would get. I raised my hand, signaling Freya to stop talking. Thinking about my previous life already made me nauseous. You seem to have misunderstood the situation. Both the Wood family and the Lee family have already defaulted to canceling the engagement. Did Preston send you here? She shook her head. No. I just don't want to see him lose. I stared at her. Aaron, didn't you like Preston so much before? This time, it's my fault. I shouldn't have suspected you of hiring the kidnappers. I shouldn't have suddenly returned from overseas. If I hadn't, Preston wouldn't have left you hurt just to save me. Her words made my head spin. Didn't want to see him lose? Freya continued, Wood Group needs that land to recover. If you insist on breaking off the engagement, then, could you at least not compete with Preston? I let out a cold laugh. Are you out of your mind? At that moment, everything finally clicked. In my previous life, when we rushed to rescue Freya, the police had already captured the kidnappers. Both enormous ransoms were recovered. Combined with the money I transferred from Qley Group, Preston secured the land. But this time, because I escaped on my own and alerted the kidnappers, they had long since fled. The police still hadn't obtained any solid leads, let alone recovered the ransom. That meant Wood Group had already lost its advantage. Freya still refused to give up. She clenched her teeth and suddenly knelt in front of me. Aaron, I'm begging you. You don't have to love him, but can you please not destroy him? I'd seen moral coercion before, but never anything this shameless. I bent down, leaned close, and spoke softly. Back then, when you heard Preston was entering an arranged marriage with me, you went abroad. Then you rushed back the moment you heard we were engaged. You're right, this is all your fault. So you should help him yourself. Your family may not be as wealthy as mine, but you can still contribute something, can't you? Besides, the money he used to save someone was spent on you, not on me. Coming to beg me, are you the foolish one, or am I? Freya's face turned deathly pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to say another word. If she understood, good. If she didn't, the one who would suffer was still her. During that time, I went back home once. My parents were gone again. It seemed they were still the same as ever, only focused on chasing their own ambitions, never changing. What they needed was merely a qualified heir. They didn't care who that heir was. Fine. It's not like I cared that much about them anyway. I lay around the house for 2 days. By then, my wrist had mostly healed. I took a car from the garage and drove straight to Kenneth's repair shop. Before I even saw Kenneth, I ran into the tattooed guy from before. He called out loudly and eagerly, Sister-in-law. Where's Kenneth? I asked. He scratched his head. Bro, Kenneth went out. Are you looking for him? No sooner had he said that than he slapped himself on the forehead. What am I saying? Of course you can look for him even if there's nothing urgent. Damn, my stupid mouth. Then he grinned at me. Sister-in-law, sit down and rest for a bit. Bro, Kenneth should be back soon. I nodded and sat down on the sofa. Several different tea sets were arranged neatly on the coffee table. I brewed myself a pot of tea and sipped it slowly. The tattooed man didn't leave. His face was full of curiosity, and his eyes kept sneaking glances at me. When he saw me brewing tea on my own, he explained somewhat awkwardly, I'm a rough guy, I don't know how to deal with this stuff. Bro, Kenneth usually makes tea for me. Don't mind me. I looked up and asked, what's your name? John. Is he very good to you? I didn't know why, but I just had that feeling. John shook his head. For a moment, I thought I'd guessed wrong. Until he said, no. Bro, Kenneth is good to all of us. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? Go on. Most of the workers at this repair shop came from impoverished mountain areas. Many of them had physical disabilities of some sort. Kevin, who worked on engines, couldn't speak, but as soon as he heard a sound, he could pinpoint exactly where the problem was. Justin, who handled maintenance, had a limp. Kyle, who did paintwork, couldn't read a single word. They came to the city hoping to make a living, only to discover that with physical limitations, no education, and no skills, even finding a decent job was nearly impossible. It was Bro Kenneth who took them in. Gave them time to learn, covered food and housing, and paid them wages. That was why the group followed him wholeheartedly, refusing to go anywhere else. So that was it. I turned back to John and asked, what about you? For the first time, a solemn expression appeared on his face. I met Bro Kenneth 5 years ago. I'd offended the wrong people and nearly got beaten to death. Bro Kenneth saved me. From that day on, I swore I'd follow him for life. If anyone dares bully him, they'll have to step over my dead body first. Honestly, hearing that shook me. All my life, my world had been lonely. Genuine kindness was rare. Yet Kenneth had managed to gather a group like this, people who followed him sincerely, working hard together. I couldn't help feeling envious. And suddenly, I really wanted to see him. Do you know where he went? John thought for a moment. He didn't say exactly where. Just that someone was looking for him, seems like it was around Tiancheng Plaza. I was about to leave when John seemed to remember something. Oh, right, sister-in-law, Bro Kenneth is actually pretty wealthy. He's just very low-key about it. He didn't want us calling you sister-in-law at first. He said you're a rich family's daughter and we should call you Young Mississippi. I frowned deeply. What kind of outdated title was that? I never imagined that at a cafe in Tanchang Plaza, I would see Kenneth sitting with Freya. I couldn't hear what Freya was saying, but her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. Kenneth listened the entire time, his brows furrowed without ever relaxing. After watching for a bit, I saw Freya suddenly stand up and move from across the table to sit beside him. My instinct screamed that something wasn't right. If this had been me before today, I might have turned around and left, then blocked Kenneth entirely. Once hurt, I would never tolerate any relationship that wasn't pure. But if it was Kenneth, I wanted to trust him, just once. As I prepared to walk into the cafe, I saw Kenneth suddenly stand up, as if afraid of touching something filthy, and quickly leave his seat. That was when we locked eyes, right at the entrance. Compared to my calmness, Kenneth froze for a moment, clearly surprised to see me there. Then he strode toward me. Aaron. Freya chased after him at that moment, urgency written on her face. Mr. Kenneth, as long as you can agree to. Her words cut off abruptly when she saw me. But she quickly regained her composure and turned to me instead. Aaron, why are you here? Are you also looking for Mr. Kenneth? As she spoke, she deliberately leaned closer toward him. But Kenneth reacted immediately, stepping straight in front of me. He looked at me with a slightly innocent expression. I deliberately put on a fierce face and said, "We'll talk when we get home." Freya watched our interaction, her gaze slowly dimming. Aaron, I really underestimated you. I shrugged. Yeah, me too. Freya was visibly at a loss. Her expression shifted like a spilled palette, green, white, red, strangely impressive. The truth was, I had never been someone easy to bully. In my previous life, I'd only ended up that miserable because I cared too much about people who never cared about me. Kenneth took me back to his place. By then, it was almost completely dark. We curled up on the sofa, neither of us speaking. After a long while, he was the one who broke the silence. You're not going to ask? Didn't you say you'd deal with me when we got back? I replied quietly, if you want to tell me, you will, even if I don't ask. If you don't want to, there's no point asking. His expression remained neutral. Do you know why Freya came to look for me? I shook my head. On the way back, I'd thought of countless possibilities. Maybe Freya had developed feelings for Kenneth, or maybe Preston couldn't stand seeing us together and deliberately sent her to provoke me. After all, they were close. They'd always done things for each other. But Kenneth suddenly asked, are you competing for the land in the southern part of Binchang? I stared at him in shock. How do you know that? Because the usage rights for that land are currently in my hands. It was something my father left me. I froze. Wait. So Freya hadn't given up. She went straight to Kenneth, trying to work through him. But how did she know the land belonged to him? There was only one answer. Preston had told her. In my previous life, he must have dealt with Kenneth when acquiring the land, so he knew. Seeing Kenneth watching me closely, I suddenly realized something. You don't think I got close to you because of that land too, do you? An inexplicable bitterness rose in my chest. So while I'd been wary of him, he'd been suspecting me as well. I lowered my head, wanting to laugh, but couldn't. Kenneth noticed and suddenly cupped my face, looking at me seriously. Silly girl. Of course I don't think that. That thought did cross my mind for a brief moment at the beginning, but I dismissed it quickly. I trust my own judgment. I asked softly, like how you trusted John and the others when you saved them. Kenneth raised an eyebrow. No. You're different. Saving them was kindness. Saving you was because my heart moved. Kenneth, you're really good at this, I pouted, mildly annoyed. With skills like that, who knows how many you've dated? Kenneth couldn't hold back anymore when he saw that. He charged forward and landed a punch squarely on Preston, knocking him to the ground, fast, precise, and brutal. Preston spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes burned with vicious fury, yet he no longer dared to move recklessly. Kenneth looked down at him and warned coldly, stay away from her. Then he put his helmet over my head, twisted the throttle, and took me away. The motorcycle sped through the mountain roads. The scenery blurred past my eyes. I leaned against Kenneth's back, letting the rush of speed wash over me, as if it could temporarily erase everything unpleasant that had happened. So where does my girlfriend want to go? Kenneth's voice came from ahead. I laughed softly. It seemed he'd heard everything I'd said earlier. I naturally wrapped my arms around his waist and replied, since you're already calling me your girlfriend, can I go to your place? I'm hungry, by the way. Of course. His laughter echoed through the mountains. And since I'm cooking, I'll make 4 dishes. That's non-negotiable. For some reason, my heart felt incredibly light at that moment. Kenneth's place was bigger than I'd imagined. He fumbled around and brought me a brand new pair of men's slippers. They were a bit big, but apparently the only unused pair in the house. I slipped them on casually and smiled. It's fine. They'll do. I tidy up occasionally. It shouldn't be too messy, he said. Even though he was the homeowner, yet somehow the one feeling awkward. I plopped down on the sofa, propped my chin on my hand, and looked at him. I don't know how to cook. I'll be relying on you today. Instead of heading to the kitchen, Kenneth picked up a medical kit and came over. The wound on my wrist, which had been bandaged yesterday, had been squeezed earlier by Preston. Blood had seeped out and dried, sticking the gauze to my skin. Kenneth carefully poured antiseptic onto the gauze, slowly loosening it from the wound. It was delicate work, yet he did it with absolute focus. Half an hour later, he finished rebandaging it and reminded me, "Don't get it wet for the next 2 days." I asked instinctively, "Then how am I supposed to shower?" "2 days without showering won't kill you." After a moment, he added, "I won't mind." "You dare." "I wouldn't." "Humph. I'll go cook now." "Okay." I smiled and nodded, suddenly realizing that whenever I was with Kenneth, I felt unusually relaxed. An hour later, he brought out 4 dishes, sweet and sour pork, garlic shrimp, steamed fish, and cucumber salad. He handed me the chopsticks. "Try them." After a few bites, I gave him a thumbs up. They looked good, smelled good, and tasted unforgettable. Just like him. Looks like I won't need to worry about food anymore. That afternoon, my father called. The message was clear, he wanted me to attend the auction 10 days later. If I could secure the Southern District land, the company would be handed over to me completely. I knew that land well. Besides the Wood and Lee families, several companies were eyeing it. In my previous life, the kidnapping shook me deeply. Combined with Freya's death afterward, I fell seriously ill and missed the auction. But even if I hadn't been sick, I wouldn't have competed against Preston. Back then, my heart was full of him. I believed I'd finally found someone I could entrust my entire life to. At the time, Wood Group was facing a debt crisis. It wasn't easy for Preston to win the bid. In the end, I transferred a large sum from Lee Group to help him. Preston won the auction. He built a theme park on that land, attracted merchants, and within a few years pushed Wood Group to new heights. That alone proved the land was a guaranteed profit. And this time, I was determined to get it. I didn't expect Freya to come begging. Unlike her aggressive attitude before, she lowered herself completely, pleading in a humble tone. "Can you not break off the engagement with Preston? There has never been anything between us beyond friendship. As long as you agree, I'll never appear in front of you again." I looked at her silently, feeling nothing but exhaustion. Yes. In my previous life, I believed that too. But after Freya died, Preston's behavior was far more than mourning a friend. I remembered the day he finally agreed to divorce me. It was after my 10th act of self-harm following depression. He came home to find me lying on the floor, covered in blood. Perhaps afraid I would die in his house, he finally agreed. Yet on the way to the divorce office, he suddenly asked, "Do you know today is Freya's death anniversary?" I shook my head blankly. I could barely manage my own life, how could I remember that? My reaction enraged him. He slammed the steering wheel and cursed me as cold-blooded and heartless. "The life you're living now was bought with Freya's death. You've never shown gratitude, not even remembering her anniversary. You only think about leaving. Do you think that frees you from your conscience? Aaron, you disgust me." I snapped back, "Fine, you're so grateful, then why don't you go die with her?" The car swerved violently, and plunged straight off the cliff. Even at the moment of death, he was still blaming me. We owed Freya. This lifetime should have been spent atoning for her. And you, what right do you have to live in comfort? But in this lifetime, we owed each other nothing. I raised my hand, signaling Freya to stop. "You've misunderstood the situation. Both families have already defaulted to canceling the engagement. Did Preston send you?" She shook her head. "No. I just don't want to see him lose." She went on, "Wood Group needs that land to recover. If you insist on breaking off the engagement, could you at least not compete with him?" I laughed coldly. "Are you serious?" Everything finally clicked. This time, because I escaped early, the kidnappers fled. The ransom was never recovered. Wood Group had already lost its advantage. Desperate, Freya suddenly knelt. "Aaron, I'm begging you. You don't have to love him, but please don't destroy him." I bent down and said softly, "When you heard about the arranged marriage, you went abroad. When you heard we were engaged, you rushed back. You're right, this is your fault. So help him yourself. He spent money to save you, not me. Coming to beg me, are you foolish, or am I?" Her face went deathly pale. She had nothing more to say. The farce ended. After I secured the land, my father kept his promise and handed the company over to me. I never told my parents about marrying Kenneth. I didn't want anyone disturbing our life together. Days passed quietly between work and home. Later, I heard Freya was going abroad. Even the person who loved Preston most didn't want him anymore. Before leaving, she posted a long exposé online, condemning his betrayal and cruelty. I casually boosted its visibility. Wood Group, already in debt, collapsed completely. Preston tried desperately to find help. Eventually, he came to me again. Months had passed. I was busy developing the land, full of ambition for the future. But Preston looked like a completely different person, gaunt, hollow-eyed, unshaven, utterly broken. I asked calmly, "Are you here to ask for my help?" He shook his head. "Aaron, I have depression. I haven't slept properly for months. Now I finally understand your pain. This is my retribution." I suppressed a smile. "How is this retribution?" "This is your blessing. In your last life, you died regretting not choosing Freya. Now heaven gave you another chance. Even if you have nothing now, you've made up for your regret. Heaven has been generous to you. People can't have everything." That was the last time I ever saw Preston. 3 months later, on the night Wood Group declared bankruptcy, Preston, drunk and in a depressive episode, drowned in his bathtub. Cause and effect. Karma, without fail. When Kenneth heard the news, he was massaging my shoulders. My father once said, "A person with poor character never goes far." I turned over and asked, "How far do you think we'll go?" Kenneth thought seriously, then said, "With our character? 100 years doesn't sound excessive." I nodded. "Not excessive at all." "Then would it be excessive for your husband to want a proper meal?" He looked at me, eyes burning, reflecting me like the most radiant rose in the world. They say loving someone is like tending a flower. Kenneth cherished me, never letting me suffer or feel wronged. And in return, I grew, becoming everything I never had in 2 lifetimes. He gave me more than enough. I wrapped my arms around his neck, kissed his lips, and said, "Not excessive."